Hey guys, welcome back. So with continuing our coverage on One World Under Doom, and I mean as far as events go, like we've seen, this is something that Doom's been working on for a while. So in a way it almost feels like this event's been going on for months, and now things are about to really start ramping up. So we gotta hop back into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top to get all notifications. Alright, so for this one we start out with Reed Richards, who's trying to progress in his understanding of magic, which is something he's been working on since Blood Hunt, though with not much of any progress. And the main reason why Reed's trying to figure this out with such urgency is because Sorcerer Supreme Doom has locked himself away for months within his magic barrier in Latveria so that no one can know what he's doing. And Reed can't shake the thought of it, because he needs to know what Doom is working on, what he's building, what he's planning, before it's too late for anyone to do anything about it. And for them to get inside, Reed needs to understand magic better. But at the same time, because Reed has been pursuing this day and night for weeks, this has caused Sue to initially try to get Reed to step away for a moment, only for him to tell her that he can't get it out of his head. So instead of trying to get Reed to stop, Sue makes a couple of suggestions that Reed just hadn't thought of already. And her first suggestion is getting help from a magic knight, with Sue referring to the current Black Knight, Dane Whitman. But it's funny how at first it takes Reed a little while to get out of his own way, and part of that has to do with the way that Reed thinks for one, because for a moment he almost falls back into completely leaning into the science, which is where he does his best work, because if all the elements are certain and consistent, then Reed can practically figure out any and everything. And it also leans into the reason why he's having trouble with magic, since different types of magic have different rules. And with magic, it can be difficult to produce the exact same outcome every time, which is how science works by definition, and it's throwing Reed off that magic just doesn't work that way. But nonetheless, with Sue making her suggestion for them to see Dane Whitman, who has a master's degree in physics, this will be a huge help to Reed since Dane already has the magic part figured out. And on top of that, Sue mentions how at their wedding, the ebony blade once sliced through her force fields like it was nothing. So there's a good chance that the ebony blade could do the same to the force fields surrounding Latveria. And this all checks out as far as Reed is concerned, because even if Dane Whitman isn't able to figure it all out, the ebony blade would still be useful for them to get through Doom's barriers and find out what he's been up to. So the two of them head over to see Whitman, but what they didn't expect was to find him sitting on a throne. And at first when they get there, he's like he can't get up because this throne, the Ebon Siege, it demands his full attention. And he goes on to explain to them how he melted down the ebony chalice, the ebony crown, and the ebony blade to make it so that this throne could allow him to tap into a whole nother register. So with hearing this, Sue is like, wait, you melted down your ebony blade, which is a kind of wild thing to do to a nearly indestructible sword that's been passed down for centuries. But Dane tells him it was cursed, it fed on hate, and sure it gave you strength, but it took your soul. So Reed lets him know like, yeah, that's kind of what we came here to borrow, which is pretty wild to say after hearing its description. But Dane lets them know that it's more useful in the siege, since it allows him to see into the truth of other times. And throughout this conversation, he asks Reed if he'd like to sit in the chair and try it out, only for Reed to politely decline. But since he's not able to lend him the ebony blade, Dane tells them that there's something even better for cutting through Doom's defenses, and that would be the fated blade. Because not only can it cut through anything, but this includes time too, which means whatever you cut with it is not going to heal, whether that be a doorway or a wound. The only problem is that it disappeared not long after it was forged in the 1300s, which practically makes it impossible to find in the present day. So for obvious reasons, this frustrates Reed, because now they're talking about magic swords that nobody can find. So he tells Dane here, like you, I'm a man of science, but I've been struggling with reconciling reproducible facts with the non-determinism of magic. I've been trying to build a practical theory of, and Dane just cuts him off right there, and he's like, oh, that's easy. And he jots some stuff down on the pad, and he's like, ta-da, magic and physics together at last. Then he hands this paper to Reed. But when Reed sees it, and he reads it, he can't believe it. And he looks at Dane Whitman like, man, this is wildly incorrect. Where'd you go to school again? Because it's practically gibberish that's written on this paper. So Dane tells him like, my bad, I thought I had something there. And he goes on to let Sue and Reed know that he does want to help, and he knows how to, but it's something that's better shown than explained, which leads to him taking them back to the year 1915 and to the western front of World War I. And as soon as they get here, Sue's like, wait, we can't be seen in these uniforms. And shortly after, she notices that she can't turn invisible. And the same goes for Reed, he's not able to use his powers as well. He's not able to stretch. And Dane's just like, it's okay. and he tells them to take a look in this mirror off to the side. And that's when they find out that they're magically possessing 2 officers, which is why they're not able to use their powers since they're not in their own bodies. And in the case of Dane, he's here as a ghost, so no one else can see him except Sue and Reed. And I love how he makes a reference here and says like, it's just like that Leapy show with the quantum. And I'm just like, yo, he's talking about Quantum Leap. I used to love that show as a kid, with Dr. Sam Beckett going back in time, and you just never knew whose body he was gonna jump into. And I mean, he definitely didn't know. But yeah, that was a great show. Brought back memories. So Dane goes on to tell them that this moment in time is their best chance at finding the fated blade before it was basically lost forever. And even though it's also lost now, like they still gotta find it, but given the fact that there's a world war going on, this means that every authority on Earth has more immediate concerns, which allows them to focus on finding the fated blade. But even now, Sue and Reed are concerned about these bodies that they're borrowing at the moment. So Dane assures them that they'll be fine, as long as they don't go running out into gunfire or nothing. Because when they're done here and they leave, the officers won't recall any of this and their minds will just fill in the blanks. So Sue and Reed eventually agreed that it's worth giving it a shot. And as long as they lay low, they don't have to worry about causing any harm to history, which could potentially cause a number of other problems. And one of the things that plays into their favor, since they're using the bodies and the appearance of these officers, is the fact that they can basically go wherever they want to, without anyone asking any questions. And just based on what Dane's told them about the history of the fated blade, they're able to take that information and just break into a library and narrow down the general location of where it currently is. And I like how Sue describes this here, because she says the key to archaeology is that people in the past were just that, people. Their brains were just like ours, which meant they made their decisions for reasons we can still understand. Suppose you're looking for a lost city. You start by assuming people built cities then for the same reasons we do now, for convenience, access to resources, and so on. When you can build a map of what past people's world looked like, you can see where they would have logically founded their cities. You put yourself in their shoes in their world, thinking as they would. Archaeology is discovery, but it's also applied empathy. And I like how that's laid out here because it's a very logical approach. So what they end up doing from here is building some metal detectors, since they won't actually be a thing for another decade, so they can find the blade. But also they gotta make sure to disassemble them so that someone doesn't find them 10 years earlier and change the course of history. And so after searching for some time, Sue gets a hit, so they start digging. And eventually this leads to them finding the fated blade. And when they find it, Sue's like, okay, well, we gotta be careful, because the last thing they wanna do is inflict any wounds on these borrowed bodies, because if either of them are cut by this blade, that wound isn't gonna close up. So Dane tells them, okay, now that we found the blade here in the past, we can move it someplace where it won't be lost, and then go fetch it back in the present. So next he asks Sue to pull out that map again, and that's when he's like, there, Fleury devant Douaumont. And that's when Sue's like, wait a minute, that place is gonna be destroyed in this war. The land's gonna be bombed, bombarded, poisoned, burned, it's obliterated. So it's likely if they take the sword there that it would be too. And Reed points out here how, even if that was a viable location, they would be risking the lives of the bodies that they're borrowing just to take it there. And on top of that, Sue makes another valid point when she tells Dane that there's no point in even moving the sword, because now that they know where it is, they can just pick it up in the present day. And that leads to her asking Dane, like, what's really going on here? And for a moment, Dane says, the equations, which then has Reed like, what about them? Just before Dane says, they're nothing, Richards, and so are you. You are nothing, as he blasts both Sue and Reed out of these bodies and into the astral plane. And when this happens, at first Sue and Reed are like, well, why would Dane do this? But then Reed notices the way that Dane switched from calling him Doctor to Richards. Reed says here that it almost sounded like, and that's when his sentence is finished, by Sorcerer Supreme Doom. And he's just like, Doom, Richards, like Doom. He almost sounded like Doom. And with seeing this, it just has me wondering one thing. Does this mean that Dr. Doom watches Quantum Leap on the Sci-Fi Channel? I mean, now I gotta know. So as soon as Sue and Reed realize that this is actually Sorcerer Supreme Doom, they both knuckle up. And we find out here that Doom had actually used the Ebon Siege to influence Dane and lure them into this. So Doom goes on to tell them, there are magical beings who have an interest in protecting Earth, you know. You learn of them when you become Sorcerer Supreme. Some even lived here on the astral plane, thinking they were safe to move against Doom. And so they forged a weapon that could kill me. I destroyed them, of course, but not before they hid the magical blade from my sight, somewhere in Earth's past where it could lie waiting for someone to find it, and wield it against me. It was intolerable. And so of course Sue is disgusted at the idea of Doom using them to find it, so Doom just basically goes on to tell them, and yet the truth was before you this whole time. This fated blade, forged in the 1300s, did you not consider its name for a moment? Middle English, Susan. What was its word for fate? Come now, you should know this. And that's when she tells him Doom, and he tells her she's correct. And he tells them the one magical weapon that could hurt me, the Doom Blade. Susan, you found it, and I've destroyed it. But while they're having this discussion, Reed goes on to ask Doom why he's hiding away in Latveria. And he asks Doom what is he planning, as a way to distract Doom so he could reach his feet around and choke him out, but it doesn't work. So Doom tells him here the time for planning was months ago. And that's something we talked about briefly when we covered the Return of the Red Hulk, because even before Dr. Doom borrowed, air quotes, the title of Sorcerer Supreme from Doctor Strange, he had already been setting the pieces in place for one world under Doom. And that's why he's basically telling Reed here, with Sorcerer Supreme Doom being locked away in Latveria, that isn't him planning, but instead, since he's had the title of Sorcerer Supreme, Doom has been taking action, which is why he's appeared in all these different series leading into one world under Doom. So Doom tells him here that he'll just put it plainly, because he's like, Richards, I've taken over the world. And he tells Reed that he wants him to know this before he kills him. And that's when he places both Sue and Reed inside of these magic spheres that continue to shrink and crush them. And that's when Sue remembers Dane mentioning the equations, as if for a moment the real Dane was trying to warn them by way of giving Reed a message, which at this point had me thinking, okay, maybe it was Dane who made the quantum leap reference. Because I mean, Doom seems like more of a supernatural guy anyway. But nonetheless, this equation that Dane had given Reed, even though it seemed like gibberish at first, it was actually a way out. So Sue just yells to Reed the equations so he can remember what it was and put it together from there. And as it turns out, the equation that Dane had written down, they were magic words to trigger a spell, which now kind of has Reed like, okay, I haven't been doing good with magic so far, I gotta get it right. And he pulls it off because he's able to use this spell and send himself and Sue home. And even though Doom doesn't try to show it, he's mad. Because he's like, is that the best you can manage, Richards? I'll leave you alone for half a year. And in all of that time, all you learn is how to run and cower like a wounded dog. Incredible. The Fantastic Four truly are useless. But from here, when we head back over to Reed and Sue, they find themselves in a world that's already been taken over by Doom, as they see Doom's face on every screen in Times Square, announcing the Global United Latveria, which we'll see plenty more of as this continues in One World Under Doom. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/DopeSpill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.